Well, we're back at Aerostar again, out in front of the hangar at Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the mothership, if you will. So today we're going to get to talk to Jim Christy and Steve Speer, President and Vice President in the other order of Aerostar Aircraft, and also known as Mockin, which did all the modifications to a lot of the Aerostars. So let's take a look in the hangar and we're going to go see what we're going to talk about. There it is, one of a kind. Gonna get all the straight scoop on this a little bit later today and talk to Jim and Steve about why this all got started and how cool a project it was, and some of the fun stuff like what the first flight was like, and were there a bunch of butterflies flying around in the first pilot's stomach, which they sure would be if it was me, especially when you'd never flown a jet before. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, beautiful airplane. Thanks for everybody coming and watching our videos. And I know it's been a while since I've put anything out. Just been busy with life. So this is the first in the series about Aerostar Aircraft, and specifically today we're going to talk about the jet. And I wanted to introduce everybody to Jim Christy, who's on my right, and Steve Speer. And I'll start off with Steve. And Steve, what's your position here at Aerostar? What's your engineering background, and what have you been doing for the last umpteen years?
Well, I guess my focus has been on designing new products.
Okay.
I'm president, but that's because you need a president, and I'm the guy. And Jim and I have been, together for 50 years almost now. Yeah. And worked together great. And like a lot of companies, you need to separate responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And so we can each do our own thing, and Jim's great at what he does, and I do pretty good at what I do. So that's kind of been what we do, and I've been focusing on then the engineering side, the certification side, and the design of new products.
Okay. Jim?
I'm the salesman.
You are a salesman, I can tell you that.
Well, I'm the salesman, and we didn't have a multi-engine pilot when I first came to work at the first company, Mockin Inc. And so they said, well, you've got a multi-engine rating, so you can be the test pilot. And so that kind of stuck, even though I'm not a commercial test pilot. If you're trying to certify something, the FAA wants to make sure that you've tested it before they get in it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've done, and it's been really interesting working with the engineers and the development people. So it's a lot of fun to be involved in the certification. And of course, they ask me from time, what do you think about this and what do you think about that? So, and my focus has always been find out what the customer wants and see if we can make that for them.
Yeah.
That's the objective,
So Jim, there's more to it now. You're also an A&P, right?
Yes, I went to A&P school, got my license, worked in California a little bit, and then got a job at Aerostar Aircraft back in the 70s, I think 73.
Santa Maria?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, 73, and then that was 1974 was the first pressurized production airplane. And it was about that time that I started, just before that. And I was only there about 3 or 4 years. And I became a customer service representative for the company, talking to mechanics about how you work on the airplane. So I was able to get a lot of practical experience going around the plant, seeing how things were done, and I gave tours, and I taught the ground school for pilots. Mm-hmm. And they had the factory test pilots do the flight training back then. Everybody came to the factory to pick up their airplane with their dealer, if they're and sometimes the dealer just came and picked up the airplane if he didn't have it already sold. But then I would do the ground school, and then the test pilots would go out and fly with all the owners and get them up to speed in the airplane.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of recurrent training back then. You just got checked out, and you never got, except for biannual flight reviews. I don't even know if those were in place back then. I don't think they were.
Steve, I don't remember. Remind me, you're a pilot also, aren't you?
No.
No, never.
I started my pilot's license, but it's like a lot of things. You got to divvy up the workload.
Yep.
And Jim was a good pilot, and I didn't really have the time to do both because you need to focus on to be a good pilot as well, right?
Yeah.
So I took, I took I don't know, probably about 20 hours with a good instructor. Harley Howell was working for us at the time, and so he'd always try to get me out there to try a few things,
Yeah.
But I never finished my license.
Yeah, but it's that engineering side. Then aerospace engineering or
Mechanical engineering.
engineering.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in mechanical engineering, you take aerodynamics, thermodynamics,
The
besides
whole.
mechanisms and
Right.
structures, all that stuff. So it's a broad education, really.
Yeah. Now we'll get into the jets in a minute,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to kind of talk about the background with you guys. How much time do you have now in total flight time?
About 4,500 hours, I think. Probably 2,500 and maybe more in the Aerostar.
I'll bet it's more.
And they're, the trips are 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Take off, go to altitude, check out the pressurization or the engines or something, and come back and land at the same airport. So that's mostly after maintenance test flights now, where when we were doing a lot of certification work, it was all try this, see if that worked, especially with all the mods that we did.
So you fly, Skip flies, right?
Yeah, our shop foreman, Skip Kemner, flies, and
He's the IA.
yes, he is an IA. Of course, we sign off everything as the repair station.
Right.
So a repair station inspector could approve things. Yeah, Skip came to work for us, and he was flying an L-19 Bird Dog to work. And I said, who is this guy flying this airplane? And found out that he was an A&P mechanic with an inspection authorization. And then I said, do you want to go fly in the Aerostar? Oh, yeah. I said, do you have any twin time? He said, well, 1,500 and twin Cessnas. And I thought,
Well, that's pretty good.
yeah, you sit in the left seat, and I'll just monitor these instruments. And he flew the airplane like he'd flown it his whole life.
Yeah.
So he's a really good stick and rudder guy.
And that's really, I think, super important in all this process. But those are all subjects of future stuff. Today, I want to talk about the jet. Brief history on well, we know it was in Ted Smith's vision. He wanted to do a full line of airplanes, single engine airplane, multiple versions of the twin, different horsepowers, and different seating arrangements and all that kind of stuff, and then eventually the jet. They mocked up the single. They built the Aerostar as we know it today, the twin, and then the jet was a dream. What happened? Why did that not come to fruition in the late 60s and early 70s?
Well, there was an engine that was under development and was actually flying on an Aero Commander in Europe. It was the Astafan engine, the Turbomeca Astafan engine. And that, as I understood it, was why Ted thought that would be the perfect engine for the Aerostar. And so he designed the Aerostar to be a high-speed, very rigid airplane so it could fly at jet speeds. I think they had variable inlet guide vanes or some mechanism that didn't work out, and they never certified the jet. But it was the perfect size for the Aerostar, and there wouldn't be another one like it until the 80s, the 1980s. And there was rumor that from a major manufacturer they were going to build a small engine like that, but there was a 20-year gap there where no engine was available small enough to put on the Aerostar.
And that, do you remember what the pound thrust on that engine might have been?
I don't,
Okay.
but it was on one side of an Aero Commander they were flying in Europe. I saw a picture of it.
Oh, that would be an interesting picture to
Yeah.
see. That's
Yeah, I don't know if it's in Dave's book or not, but
I don't remember that one.
yeah, but that was the whole idea. Hey, we can build a small fan jet. And of course, your dad had drawings or made drawings of the twin fan jet configuration with engines on the wings, and also they had them on the aft fuselage.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at Aerostar back in '73 to '78 or so, they had a airplane there in a separate R&D section with a JT-15D Citation engine on the aft fuselage. Just had it mocked up.
Yeah.
And of course the airplane was stretched, because when you take the engines off the front and put them on the back, you're going to have a weight and balance problem.
Yeah.
So they had to stretch the fuselage to put the pilots further forward. Yeah, so it was always, they were always trying to figure out how to make the airplane a jet. And I always questioned, well, why did they put 6-cylinder engines on it? Well, because they had the airplane and they didn't have the jet engine yet. So that was what they were going to do in the meantime until the jet became available.
Yeah, because the Jet Commander was already in production.
Yes. And Ted had designed that, and part of his, I remember part of the idea with the Aerostar was the Jet Commander, he developed the airplane, and then they said, well, wait a minute, we want a couple more seats.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, now you've got to redesign the airplane again. Well, you know, it'd be nice if it was a little wider. And so they were constantly changing the design, and that was aggravating for Ted. And finally, when he got it certified, he said, I'm done. I'm going to go build my own airplane. So he knew jets were the way of the future.
Yeah. Steve, you worked for Aerostar also, but early days, right? When did you start?
No, I came in later. I think I got there at 76 or 77, just after Ted died.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was at Santa Maria or Piper?
It was Santa Maria.
Santa Maria still.
Yeah, yeah.
So moving forward a little bit, what made you decide to embark on the Aerostar Jet project? It had been sitting dormant, basically. It was a good concept, and you decided to, let's do this thing. How'd that come about?
Well, I think, you know, of course, Jim and I always knew about the legacy of the airplane, and we knew what a great fuselage it was, or structure, wings, and everything was rigid and built to be a jet. So we knew the history of that. We just wanted to see that get done. And we've tried all kinds of things over the years to get it done, and finally, I guess we got it flying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ever since we kind of got together in '78, I think, wasn't about right, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah, we did all these improvements to the piston engine, putting different engines in to get the performance up there. But in the back of our minds, we always wanted to see that jet version of the airplane.
Yeah, everybody did. And I'm grateful that Dad got to see it fly and
Yeah.
fly in it.
Yeah.
Which, and what made you decide to embark on the project? I mean, why now? I mean, here it is. What? Almost 20 years later.
Yeah, that's not more.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was really in the late '70s that Jim and I got together and worked to get the improvements for the piston engine. But again, like I mentioned, we all knew that the airplane was designed to be a jet, and at the time we thought that would make a great product for the market. You know, there would be real demand for a jet because of the speed and the reliability and stuff for turbine engines.
And this was right at the time the very light jet programs were kind of starting to kick in, or is this earlier than that?
It was a little before that. That stuff really didn't kick in until the mid to late '80s, I think.
Okay.
I think the first one we'd kind of heard about was the single engine jet, you know, the Century jet. That was kind of going on at the same time. That's a twin, like it's almost like a small
Visionaire Vantage was
Yeah.
a single engine. That was a Burt Rutan design. And, there was the American Aviation Industries Hustler.
That's right. That's another one.
Came out first, and
Yeah.
they decided they were going to just build all the tooling to manufacture the jet before they flight tested it
Yeah.
or got it certified. And then evidently that market disappeared for some reason. I don't know really why. But then so we knew that was the direction aviation was going, turbine power. And we already had an airplane capable of turbine power. A lot of people said, hey, why don't you guys put some PT-6s on that airplane?
That's a question that comes up a lot.
It does, still to this day. And Ted was not a big fan of turboprop engines. He was not a fan of turboprop engines because the fuel efficiency, was way worse than a piston engine.
Right.
And so we kind of realized, well, we've already got an airplane capable of jet speeds. Why don't we just put jet engines on it like he initially intended?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there wasn't any small jet engine that would fit. But at some point in time, Steve, Dr. Williams contacted you, and what did he tell you?
Yeah, it kind of came up for one of the NBAA shows we were back doing. I forgot where it was. It might have been in Texas, but Dallas. But we had made a mock-up of a kind of a derivative airplane of the Aerostar with jets on the back, and we're trying to see how that market would go, thinking that, at least if we presented, maybe we could find some interested parties. And I think some of Dr. Oka's
Dr. Williams.
Or Dr. Williams, associates and stuff came over and saw it. Then they got Dr. Williams over there to look at it. And he was really excited about it because he that's what he did. He was building a lot of small turbine engines for the military. And in fact, remember he built one even for Chrysler for their car at one time.
Oh, that's right.
And so he always wanted to see his engines in an airplane, and of course nobody had an airplane that size before. He had an Aerostar, and he knew what, or at least he
chartered one,
but he
think.
chartered one. He used an Aerostar for flying around, so he was familiar with the airplane and was pretty excited about the Aerostar. And so we just started talking about putting fan jet airplane engines on the Aerostar. And at the time, he and Garrett at the time were making prototype engines for the new generation trainer program for the Navy. And Garrett ended up getting the contract, and Williams didn't. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about putting that engine on the Aerostar. And
This is the model that Williams sent.
yeah, that's the model that Williams sent there. And at the time, it was like a 1,200 pound thrust engine that they were going to do. But we were just going to modify existing airplanes because we didn't have the type certificate of the Aerostar at the time. Although we did work out an arrangement maybe to get parts and stuff from Piper, but the arrangement was that the engine, they couldn't afford to put it back into production with just us. So, and Cessna was interested in that engine for their Citation jets.
Okay.
And that made the engine grow to be a bigger diameter than the original one and more thrust. And so it kind of, and the price went up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had some interested people at the time to do that program as a retrofit.
Jim, turn that sideways to that camera over there a little bit. Notice this is the Williams engine that was probably bigger in diameter, and it's sitting up higher, very similar to the 737 MAX. and that's why they had to put it up higher because
Yeah.
it's bigger in diameter.
Bigger in diameter. You can see how it goes up, and then has a little bit of an S-duct going down
Yeah.
out the back. Yes.
Yeah. So engines were obviously an issue. So nothing. So this all's kind of evolving over time, and
That was about the 2000 time frame when we were and talked to prospective
Yeah.
buyers who would sign up for the retrofit of the Williams even after it grew.
Yeah, I think this started like in 2000 or 1988, and then in 1981 to 4 is when we were talking to some investors about doing this program with the 44.
Yeah, this was the FJ44 engine, it says here on the cowling, and that turned out to be a 1,900 pound thrust engine, and that's what Cessna put on their CJ1.
okay.
So it wasn't until later in the late 1990s that Dr. Williams was planning to make the FJ 33 engine, which is more like a 1,300 pound thrust engine. And so that's the one we signed an agreement with Williams to use that engine going forward.
Now, at that time, had the 601P that you modified been acquired yet?
No,
So it still had.
still everything was in design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Engines really, I mean, this is really the key to the whole thing. So we've got Williams involved now, and how did you end up with Pratt Whitney?
Well, and it was another thing here that the F-22 was not certified, and they were not going to. It was kind of close to the time soon after that Dr. Williams died, and Greg took over, and it's totally understandable. You have to focus on where you think you can make your money, and they obviously were. Cessna was their biggest client, so they were focusing on developing an engine for the Cessna Citation series, which was primarily the 44, and then they did some other programs with them as well. But since they never had the airplane certified, and we were trying to buy a couple engines or get a couple engines, and they wanted us to put up quite a bit of money to get those first two engines, more money than we could afford. And also the program dragged on, and they said, well, let's just go, we're going to focus our stuff on other stuff. So we kind of parted ways on the development contract that we had. And that's when we got a hold of Pratt Whitney, and they were eager to support this program because they knew the Aerostar was designed to be a jet to start with as well. And they were really great because they, arranged for us to get a couple of engines and support the program. They were pretty good all the way through. So we were lucky that they actually, because of the Eclipse program, they did a spin-off for an engine for the Eclipse program, which is smaller than we needed, but we might have been usable. But then they wanted to develop a family of engines based on that criteria where they were real similar. One was the 610, which is the Eclipse engine. One was the 615, which is the engine we use, and one was the 625, which is the one that's on the Phenom. And there are different class thrust categories.
And the 615's 1,450 pounds?
Yeah, 1460, I think, about that region.
So
I think it was the 617 that went on the Phenom 100, and
Yeah.
it was.
Do I say 617? Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah, you said
That's 625.
625.
Yeah.
In the sense they've made them for a whole
Yeah.
bunch of other airplanes,
Yeah.
like the Pilatus PC-24 has a Williams engine, and it's been
Williams or Pratt?
Williams.
Oh, Williams, okay.
Wildly successul. They had to build
Yeah.
a bigger plant to make them.
Wow.
So
Well,
that's really paid off for Williams. But engines are the key to airplane development. When they came
Yeah.
out with a jet engine, well, they made the B-47, and they,
Yeah.
No,
Just keep going,
that's kind of an unknown or obvious thing is new engines develop are the key to developing new airplanes.
Yes.
It's just everything centers around the engine. That's why the Aerostar Jet was kind of dormant, because there wasn't an engine for it. And so in some ways, it was kind of backwards, because Ted jumped the gun thinking, I'm going to make an airplane.
For that new fan turbo mecha engine.
Yeah.
And then it never materialized till late.
Oh, that's funny. That's, you know, when you look at the thrust, that's almost 3,000 pounds of thrust.
Right.
And the empty weight was
43.
Yeah. So I mean, you think of the power to weight ratio on that. That's
Yeah.
That's
You'd
pretty
almost think like, well, do you need big engines like that? Well, on a hot day, all these jets really suffer, turboprops and jets.
Yeah.
They really lose a lot of power. So yeah, you do need all that thrust. So when it's a 100-degree day, you have stellar performance still.
well, it's like the Aerostar 700. You need all that horsepower just flying around. Not really, but on takeoff and one
Yeah.
goes away.
Yeah.
That's why it's a safety margin, really.
Oh yeah. I mean, think about it. The first Aerostar flew with a total of 360 horsepower. Actually, less than that. But
Yeah.
360 horsepower,
Yeah.
Right.
which we have now one engine that's doing that. So that's
You know,
amazing.
in the process, when we first got the Aerostar Jet flying, we were talking to some Canadian certification people about maybe building it in Canada.
Mhm.
I tell them, Jim, what that flight test pilot came down and flew the airplane.
Yeah, he flew the airplane, and it was an October day, and it was about 45 degrees, and
This is the jet.
the jet, and we went down to the end of the runway, and he was flying the airplane, and as all test pilots that I've flown with in the jet have done, they want to line up on the runway and go to full thrust, let it stabilize while they're holding the brakes, and then release the brakes and take off. Well, you know, I know it's a requirement that you have to be able to hold the brakes at full thrust on both engines, but having made better brakes for the Aerostar, then we knew that those brakes would hold it. And when he took off, we were climbing initially at 140. We had to keep it under 140 for gear up speed. And then once the gear was up, he transitioned to about 160, and the vertical speed indicator was pegged at 6,000 feet a minute. And we were climbing, and he increased the speed to 200. We're still doing 6,000 feet a minute. And he commented, and he was a jet pilot, you know, and he commented, it's a really good performance. And then he said, later on, he said, well, you know, you might want to restrict the thrust a little bit, you know, on this airplane, because, you know, it's somewhat intimidating, you know, for a less experienced pilot. You know, and I said, well, would you like us to restrict the thrust if you had one? And he said, well, no, not at all. So he knew that, okay, yeah, it's stellar thrust, but I mean, on a cold day, if you don't need that much thrust, there's a solution. You just pull back the thrust lever, you know, but everybody wants to push them all the way forward. And
Yeah, you remember at the time he said that was the best performing general aviation airplane he's ever flown.
yeah.
And that's and we know that. That's
He was out of Winnipeg, I think,
Yeah.
from a certification office in
Yeah.
Winnipeg, and so he's a real nice guy. And he wrote us a nice evaluation letter and said basically it's certifiable as is. We went up and did all the certification, stability and control tests that we needed to do, which was mostly all low speed things. Like, you know, put one wing down and see if you can pick the wing up with the rudder, and, you know, and he would get the airplane going left and right, and see how many cycles it took to stabilize it. And he said you're allowed 5, as I recall, and it would stable within 3. You know, he was pushing the rudder and getting the nose way over here, and then hard rudder the other way, and the airplane is flying back and forth. In 3 cycles, it was stable again.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So he was impressed. The only thing he did say was that maybe you need a pre-select on the flaps.
Yeah,
Which
that
was-
gets a lot of people in the training, and
Yeah, you know that. You know.
it's just. But
You have to
once
stop
you get used
it.
to it. It's fine.
Yeah, and the one solution might be, okay, you just restrict the flaps to 20 degrees, and go down or up. You know, but 45 degrees is nice.
Oh, it sure makes a difference.
Tremendous drag.
Shorter fields and things.
And you know, Enviro designed and made a pre-select system for the Aerostar.
Yeah, I remember that years ago.
We had all the drawings of it and stuff here, so we could have.
So we could incorporate that.
Yeah.
That was about the only thing that he said you might need that. I think he was initially a little concerned about the nose wheel steering too. You know, as all new Aerostar pilots are, they tend to over control the nose wheel steering. So just take it easy, and
once you get moving, you don't really need it anymore.
you know, first on that day we test flew the piston airplane just to get him familiar. Just to get him familiar with the basic airframe. Then we came back and flew the jet. So he had a good understanding of the basic piston airplane and then the jet, and he was really impressed with it.
Do you remember his thoughts on the differences and how it felt? I mean, obviously with a lot more power and it's smoother and a little quieter, but
I think I don't remember what he said in the letter, but it felt the same. He was very impressed that the pitch. I did ask him that with the engine slightly lower, when you go to full power on a go-around or something, there's a pitch-up moment, and I asked him how much force, and I think the regulations say 60 pounds of force, and he said, "Oh, yeah, that's nothing. Don't." You know, it was a little more pitch-up than with a piston airplane, but he said, "Oh, that's nothing. Don't worry about that. That's certifiable just as is."
What did this whole development process? So now let's go to the point where, okay, we're going to do this. Pratt Whitney was identified probably prior to getting the 601P, or which came first there?
I think we had the 601P. We bought it and used it for gross weight increase.
Okay.
And some other certification programs, and then we had basically restored it. And that was the obvious choice for the jet because we owned it.
Yeah. And what year is that one?
It's a 1977, and it had 1,600 total time.
Okay.
When we bought it.
So not too much more than that now.
Probably 1,700.
Okay. So what was that development project? From that point on, now we're in development, and the idea was to build something that could go through the certification process, and there's a lot of, I'll call it paperwork involved in doing that to make sure that all the steps are in the right place and all the documentation is correct. But kind of briefly talk about that process and what did that look like from this point until, hey, we're ready to go, we're ready now to actually go fly this thing, and then I want to find out what that first flight was like.
Steve, that was Steve did a fantastic job of laying all that out and designing the structure for the engine mounts, and that was a big deal, you know, to take off the piston engines and the structure for that and get rid of some of the structure that supported the piston engines and now put that structure inside the wing instead of in the back over the nacelle. That was structure that held the engine in place. So he designed
balance.
He designed the whole thing.
Okay.
And kind of like, you know, Ted Smith was an autocrat, and that was his airplane, and he approved everything. And so you need somebody, not a committee. You need somebody in charge to say, this is how we're going to do it. And Steve would always say, what do you think about it? I said, oh, yeah, that looks good. And I don't remember contributing anything to the design part other than, hey, maybe we better beef up the flaps in case the flaps are down and we have to do a full power go around or something. But yeah, he designed the whole thing and on the CAD computer system, and everything just pretty much fell into place and worked and fit. And it was really pretty straightforward, but it did take, how many years, Steve? For at least 3.
Yeah, at least 3 just to build the prototype, yeah.
I mean, we committed to buy the engines, I think, in 2005 or 6, and we didn't fly the airplane until 2010.
Wow.
So it was a huge undertaking with Skip Kemner and Jamie Bartlett. Both were focused on that alone, so that took a lot of capability out of the hangar just to build the jet. Take the wings off, put them in a jig, pull the skins off, all that work. And those two guys pretty much did the whole thing.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have a couple of guys that had a lot of skill, you know, a lot of, they were a big help in getting that thing built, you know, actually fabricated and
flying.
flying, that's right.
You know, you just look at that, and one, it was a huge financial outlay for you guys to do this. And then there was an interesting story you told me about the engines as well that was kind of fun because I think originally they were leased. And but there was something special about that because at a certain point in time you could decide to buy them, and then all the payments that you'd made on the lease went towards the purchase of the engine. So you made the decision to buy the engines, so that, well, yeah, if it doesn't go as far as we want it to go, we don't. At least we have an airplane that's flyable rather than an airplane with no engines on it.
Absolutely, because we were up against there was a date in our contract with them is, so if we would have gone past that, then we couldn't have bought the engines, and our current payments wouldn't have applied to it. So that's when we decided, hey, we don't want to lose that money.
Yeah.
So that's why we decided to buy the engines too.
Well,
make it work,
great,
which is the right thing to do, because otherwise you just had an airframe and no engines.
Mm-hmm. You go through all this development with really sharp people, your engineering, and I know you were involved in all of this. You may not think you were, but I'm sure there was a lot of input.
The nice thing about, or good thing about Jim, he has a lot of practical, you know, expertise on how things should be done, you know, and made. And so he was constantly contributing to the design that way.
So you get all this done, you get the engines on, we'll see video of the airplane itself, but you've done all this stuff on the ground. When did the FAA really get involved in this process prior to the first flight?
Yeah, well, I forgot exactly when it was. I think it was just before first flight. We had a preliminary type certificate board meeting with the FAA, and of course this program was kind of coordinated through the Small Aircraft Directorate, which is out of Kansas City, rather than Seattle, which was the Large Aircraft Certificate Office. They have since kind of changed how they label these various sections of the FAA and locations. But we had that meeting to determine what we needed, you know, and develop the certification plan and have that kind of approved. And so then by the time we got the airplane kind of ready to fly, then Jim flew it.